Hello everyone, welcome to mystery number 6. I'm your host Ron France, and today we're going to talk about the mystery of faith. This is a huge, actually it's also a more personal mystery, a deeper mystery. We have to go deep into our own selves in this one and really look at, what we want to look at today is how faith works in the human heart, and this mystery of faith coming into our life and the outworking of that. What happens? How does it work? Let's unravel this mystery of faith and how it works in the human heart. And our text today is 1 Timothy chapter 3. We'll look at verse 8 and 9. Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. Holding the mystery of the faith. And this not only, of course, applies to deacons, but it applies to all believers. And a very big part of it is the conscience. How our conscience, what state our conscience is in. Conscience in the Greek definition is the word co-knowledge. It means two different sources of knowledge. We have our spirit, and there's given unto every man the measure of faith from God in our spirit when we're born again. But we also have the soul, and what we see and feel and think in our mind, in our memories, and in our capacity to make decisions. And these two joining together, where the spirit and the soul come together, is called the human heart. And the voice of our heart is our conscience. Our conscience speaks from the depth of what we really believe in the combined knowledge of spirit and soul. And so the Greek literal translation of that word conscience is co-knowledge, which is totally awesome. But we're holding the mystery of this faith, and we have to hold it in order for it to work right, in a pure conscience. The conscience greatly affects it. Let's look at 1 John chapter 3, which gives a real good explanation of faith working. Verse 21, chapter 3. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, if our heart is not telling us, hey, you know this is wrong and you're doing it anyway, when you're in that situation, faith doesn't work very good. But if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. And whatever we ask, we receive of Him, because we keep His commandments and do those things that are pleasing in His sight. And this is His commandment, that we should believe on the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as He gave commandment, because faith works by love. That's what really energizes our faith, is when we're walking in love toward God and toward people. But the big part of it here is when we have our heart in a position where it's saying we're following God, we're serving God, we're loving God, we're not holding back, we're pressing in. You know, because it says right here, whatever we ask, we receive of Him. God's not holding back on us. God is never the problem. And He's not holding out. He's not holding back. But He knows that we must qualify. We have the promises of God, but we have to qualify for them. There is a qualification, and one of them is believing, having faith in those promises. And just as we read, because we keep His commandments and do those things that are pleasing in His sight, If we want to have the will of God in our life, we have to do the will of God for our life. I mean, it's that simple. And faith obeys, faith works, faith seeks, faith desires, faith receives, and faith speaks. So we have to have it in that pure conscience, though, because if our conscience condemns us, in Romans it talks quite a bit about that. If our heart condemns us and our conscience is bothered, it says faith won't work. It doesn't work. It's not of faith. The things that we're thinking and feeling and doing, they won't be in line with faith because our conscience is condemning us and saying, we're not really doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're not really even believing what we're supposed to be believing if we're getting involved in things that we shouldn't be involved in. So the conscience, the heart, which is where faith operates out of the heart. Jesus said, with the heart man believes. Romans says, with the heart man believes unto righteousness. If we don't doubt in our heart, but believe that those things which we say will come to pass, we'll have whatever we say when we're in agreement with God. You can't fake it. Actually, in the first chapter of 1 Timothy, he made this statement right off the bat. He said, the goal of the commandment, the goal of what we're being asked to do, the charge that we've been given, is love out of a pure heart, or the Greek says clean heart. The Lord cleans our heart up, washed by his blood. The goal is love out of a clean heart, a good conscience, and an unfeigned faith, not faking it. Another way it says it is a real faith, a true faith. We can't fake it. We're not trying to believe, and that's one of the things that we can really look at is when we're trying to believe something. What do we automatically know? That there's something wrong in our heart. We're not connecting with the promise of God in the right way. We're not trying to believe this stuff. We're not faking it. And so much of the time we say, well, I believe this, I believe that. But when it comes down to what we're going to do, other things sway us. A big one, very good example is David and Goliath. A very clear example of faith. I mean, all of Israel was afraid of Goliath. He would come out there every day and say derogatory things about God and about Israel. And David heard it. And he saw what was happening. He came there. It says about the Israel's army, when they saw Goliath, it says when they saw him, they trembled. And when he spoke, they fled. I mean, they were totally afraid of this guy. And David was of a different spirit. David had a different heart. He had faith in God and faith in his covenant. He didn't compare himself to Goliath. His brothers and all of the army were comparing themselves to Goliath. David compared Goliath to God and said, what's the problem? He's defying the living God. Let's take him out. Because compared to God, Goliath wasn't very big. But the whole army of Israel, the armies of the living God, they were saying, he's so big we can't take him. But David was saying, he's so big I can't miss. I'll take my sling out there. We'll take care of this guy. So he was operating in a different level of faith than they were, obviously. But his faith produced action. His faith caused him to do what God wanted, which was defeat their enemies and save Israel. So that's how faith works. It works out of our heart. And one of the great things for us then, as believers, is to maintain, like Paul said, I'm maintaining a good conscience towards God. And one of the great things to do that is Romans 10:17 says, so then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, or the rhema of God, what God is speaking to you. And this is where it gets really personal, because your faith level is about where God is speaking to you. What is He speaking to you? Because when God speaks to you, that creates faith in us. When we hear it, when we hear, we want to hear, when we want to hear what God has to say. And that's really where it comes into a heart issue. We know in our heart when we're listening to God and when we're not. And so the question is, do you want to hear with the intent of doing what God has to say? And that's where the battle is for a lot of people. And that's really the mystery of this thing. Because once we step into a realm of faith, impossibilities become possible. Once we step into this realm of faith and on whatever area that we're focusing our faith, we're looking beyond what we see and what we feel, just as David did with Goliath.